to love them, to like want to be their dad. Like theoretically I wanted to do it. Like in my head, I was like, yeah, I want to be a good guy. Like I want to be a dad. I want to support my wife because she really wants to do this. But like in actual, my heart and soul and actually like dealing with it, it took about a year to handle it. So it's, but I look back now and I can say, even though it was hard, that I was happy. And I'm still happy and I'm glad I did it. And I've changed a lot as a result of it. I'm not the same person I was a few years ago before we had all those experiences. Here's this, I want to give a couple quotes though, for your listeners who in their mind says, yeah, easier said than done. Mm-hmm. And really what we're talking about right now is, reframing the past. But I will say this, talking about your hardest experiences, having an empathetic witness as an example, it's just as scary, but also just as important to tell people about your desired future self. Like that's kind of a key, is when you've defined your future self, you actually need to start having the courage to tell people about your goals and dreams. What they say, the number one deathbed regret that people have is that they didn't have the courage to be the person they wanted to be. Instead, they lived up to the expectations of those around them. And so you don't want to have a life of regret, and you need to be honest about the person you genuinely want to be. And that may come with some risks. 100%, it's going to take courage. But that's the only way for you to actually live genuinely towards your future self, the person you want to be or believe you should be. But I'll share a few quotes. These are kind of really helpful in helping understand how to deal with the emotions of it. And it's really kind of important to realize that personality has a lot to do with your comfort zone. Like your comfort zone and your personality are kind of the same thing. To do anything outside your comfort zone is kind of to do something inconsistent with how you typically do things. And so if you want to stay a similar person to who you've been for a long time, just stay in your comfort zone. Research, though, does say your personality is going to change over your lifetime no matter what you do. Even if you don't do anything, just because life events will change you, environments will change you. But if you're proactive towards a future self, you want your future self to be the thing that's guiding your behavior, not your past. But anyways, here's just a few quotes. I'm just going to share 3 quotes because I think they're really important for people to kind of understand the emotional aspect of it, because obviously stepping outside your comfort zone is an emotional experience. Telling people about your biggest fears or biggest problems from your past is an emotional thing. The thing that's blocking you is emotions. One of the things that trauma does is it leads to emotional rigidity. You become rigid and unwilling to handle emotions. The key to getting out of that is becoming what's called psychologically or emotionally flexible. You become better and better at handling your emotions rather than being consumed by them. So with all of that said, here are 3 quotes. One of them is from Dan Sullivan. He's pretty much the number one entrepreneurial coach in the world, but he said that all progress starts by telling the truth. In my opinion, addiction is a huge part of my life. I know that someone's ready to overcome an addiction when they start openly admitting, they start telling the truth. Look, I've got this problem, but I'm ready to change. Right. There's another kind of concept in Alcoholics Anonymous that you're as sick as your secrets.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Quote from Viktor Frankl. He said, "Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as it has a form." Okay, let me read it again. Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as we form a clear and precise picture of it. And so this is, I think, why journaling is so big, is when you journal about your experiences, it allows you to actually get them out of your head and you can start to give them form so that then you can actually do something about it. Also, this is why telling people about your experiences is good, because it gets it out of your head and gives it a form so that you can actually, so it's no longer suffering. Then this is kind of a quote that goes with it. This is Mr. Rogers, our boy, Mr. Rogers.
Oh, yes.
He said, anything that is human. I love Mr. Rogers. Isn't he great?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Here's the quote. It's really good. He says, anything that is human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can become more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. So you can easily reframe experiences from the past by changing how you feel about them. And you do that through journaling and through talking about it. And then also the courage to tell people about yourself and your goals. That's crucial in convincing yourself that you can actually go and chase that future self and stop being the person you think you are.
I love all of that. You are so right. I know when I knew that I needed to get this out there to help somebody else and help myself, it was terrifying. It's terrifying, but it was
huge. Absolutely.
It is, but it was the beginning of my own self-healing journey. It's like I had to write it down. I had to start blogging. I had to get it out there. So I have so many people say, how do you do it? How do you say it? How do you tell your story? Aren't you scared of being judged? Of course I am. But you know what? It's like, it doesn't matter to me anymore, because the right people that are supposed to be in your life will be there. And if I can help one person, I can save one person's life, then it was all, and I don't want to say it was all worth it, but it gives meaning to what happened.
Huge. So, yeah. And you know what? At some point, the ego gets out of the way and you stop worrying about looking stupid. You just want to move forward. You want to stop being defined by the past. You want to stop being the same person you've been. You want to move towards your dreams, your goals, or just making the changes you want. And so, there's a quote that says, when the why is strong enough, you'll figure out how, and so it's just kind of like that's why committing to your future self is so important, is because then it becomes more important than the emotions you'll experience through the way. Most people, when they look at personality, they look at it kind of from a pain and pleasure perspective. You do what's natural, you do what's pleasurable, you avoid anything that's painful and anything that's not who you really are. But that kind of leads you to a very small comfort zone. It leads you to kind of a very small life where you think you've got to discover yourself and then ultimately choose goals that fit your innate personality. It's a really limiting way of living. It's a very non-flexible way to live. It's a way to pretty much limit who you can be, and it stops you from learning. Instead, if you choose a purpose to live towards, and again, from Viktor Frankl's perspective, and it's really important, if you don't have a purpose, you actually don't have meaning in the present, and your present becomes something that you just distract yourself from because you don't know what to do. You actually have to have a clear sense of future, and defining your future self gives your life purpose. It gives it direction so that you can actually go through what psychologists call deliberate practice, where you can develop skills, whatever it is you want to do. I mean, if you want to be a famous YouTuber, decide that what you want to be, so that then you can actually go through the process of becoming that. Like whatever your goal is, fitness, whatever it is, you have to have a future in mind so you can go through a process to get there. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have a goal, so you can't choose a process. So yeah.
Wow.
That's kind of just some big thoughts.
Those are huge.
Yeah. Oh, but just as a thought, once you have that purpose, it becomes something that's worth living consistent towards. And yes, it's scary. Yes, you've got to become more emotionally flexible so that you hold your emotions loose. This is actually one of the reasons, I'll just throw the cat out of the bag right now. This is one of the reasons why personality tests are actually very destructive. Like type-based personality tests, type-based ones that give you a label, is because when you assume identity, you seek to defend that identity, and because it feels personal, and you seek to confirm the identity. And as people, our identity in many ways is shaped by the story we tell about ourselves. So if you take these tests seriously, then you might say, I'm an introvert, I'm an INFJ, I'm a 6, whatever the test actually prescribes. I'm a white, I'm a Simba, I'm a superhero. However, actually Facebook had to ban type-based tests because people loved them so much that, 87 million people gave away their personal information to get one of these tests. And a lot of these tests are just, there's tons made, and a lot of them were scammers because it was easy to kind of prey on people. But when you assume a label, there's a lot of problems that come with that, unless you're very strategic about that label. Just as an example, like when I chose to be a writer, I called myself a writer, and I then could assume that identity. But that label was strategic towards my future self. It wasn't a label that allowed me to justify who I currently am. Like if say and so what these labels do is they stop you from seeing a future self that's different from who you are today. They think that you are, so if you say I'm an INFJ or I'm a 6, you actually tend to think that that's who you've always been. which actually isn't the case. And it makes you think that that's who you always are, which isn't the case. From a psychological perspective, actually, in different contexts and around different people, you're not the same person. You're not always the same. You're not always a 6 or a 5 or whatever. In some situations, you're going to be relaxed. In some situations, you're not going to be. In some situations, around certain people, you're going to show up a certain way. And so it's really about context and about how in certain situations, you're a different person. But even more than that, it's about defining the person you want to be versus justifying the person you are. And when you tell people about your future self, what you want to do is you want to actually hold your current identity loose, because who you are today is not who you're going to be in the future. Like, I'll just use you as an example. And there's a lot of research on this from Dr. Daniel Gilbert at Harvard. And I would also point to research at UCLA from Hal Hershfield, and I can give you the links if you want. But
yes.
So there's a TED Talk for anyone who wants like the really simplified version. It's a 6-minute TED Talk called The Psychology of Your Future Self. It's a 6-minute TED Talk. The guy's a Harvard psychologist. But basically, here's what he does. And I'd be interested in how you answer this question. So he asks the question, are you the exact same person you were 10 years ago? What would you say to that?
I would say no.
I'm guessing you've changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Yes.
Sounds like you've done a lot of courageous things as well. You've probably grown in your perspectives, and you've probably changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, right? You don't see the world the exact same way. You don't have the exact same goals, same habits.
Yes, but now I'm rethinking. So I'm not, but I am. I still have, I still want to help people. I still care about.
Well, yeah, there's certain things that you've brought forth, obviously, that you would keep with you and that you're going to want to keep with you in the future, right?
Yes, but I'm not the same. I'm not shy anymore. Not as shy. I'm louder. I speak more now. Yeah, there's so many different things. So yeah,
I'm guessing that, yeah, there's obviously, it's not like there's some aspects of you that are different. There's some aspects of you that are the same. The things that you've kept with you are the things that you feel are worth keeping with you. And maybe some of it are just bad habits that you've kept with you, but basically the idea is it's really good emotionally and mentally to not assume that you're the exact same person, because you're not the exact same person. There's aspects of you that are the same, but if you put the version of you into some of your former situations, you'd actually respond very differently, right? Because you're not actually exactly the same human being. You've got a lot of different perspectives that you didn't have before. Right. This actually can help you be very empathetic towards your former self, because your former self, they were in a different situation. They were dealing with different things. And actually, this is why it's important to reframe the past, because you can view the past from a more mature perspective. Like, I don't have to see my former experiences as the 11-year-old kid that was going through them, right? Like, I can look at the past and be a little bit more mature about it and say, okay, like, I can give it different perspective. That's why memory is flexible. And actually, just as something I probably should say, I will say my dad's no longer a drug addict. Like, he actually changed all that on my mission, and we've become very good friends. And I've actually asked him his perspectives of those former experiences so that I could get broader context and understanding on what led him to the decisions he made. And I couldn't have done that as an 11-year-old kid. We don't need to be the same person we once were, but also what the research says, it's very important to view your future self as a different person. This is something that people have a hard time doing, because we assume that who we are today is who we'll always be. It's actually kind of a psychological problem or a mental mistake that people make, but it's better to say your future self is going to be just as different as you are from your former self. And so rather than thinking you're going to be the same way, you define the person you want to be and start using that as the benchmark for the decisions you make today. And then you can go through the process of learning. You can choose to become who you want to be versus just consigning yourself to the person you've defined yourself as.
Wow, that's a whole lot to think about. but it makes sense the way that you are telling it, because I guess I just never really thought about all that stuff. So explain really quick then the difference between Myers-Briggs and Enneagrams.
I don't actually study the tests and their specifics. What I'll tell you is this: they're junk science. They essentially fit into the category of horoscopes or palm readers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are more scientific ways to analyze personality, but those tests are about as low on the totem pole as you can get, and they're just not that great. But they come with a lot of baggage. They're very popular. They're very good for big business. but they're just not accurate for how people really work. You don't